be like available after that too. Also,
Yes.
all right, sounds good.
Welcome back to Sister Soul Sessions, where we are elevating entrepreneurs one soulful conversation at a time. I'm Brittany, and I'm joined by my co-host Bee. And
Hey,
today's
hi.
guest is someone who's pushing boundaries in creativity, culture, and innovation. The co-founder and creative director of FactoryLab, Mr. Omar Bailey himself.
Hey, what's happening? Happy Friday. Thanks for having me.
Yes, happy Friday.
And yes, and so pretty much Omar's journey has taken him from leading the Yeezy Innovation Lab at Adidas to co-founding FactoryLab, one of the most forward-thinking footwear design studios ever. And we're just honored to sit with him today and this morning to know more about his story, his vision, as well as how he's shaping the future of footwear.
Yes, so Mr. Bailey, if you wouldn't mind taking a few moments just to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit of what you have going on right now, and we'll get started with some questions.
Cool, Mr. Bailey. You make me sound so old when you say that. I'm Omar Bailey, co-founder and creative director of FactoryLab. I started the company with my co-founder 3 years ago, but I have a long history of being in this business. Actually, starting long before I was in the business officially. I was born in New York. Parents are from Jamaica. Came to America in the 70s. Had me and my younger sister, amongst other siblings. And I started drawing sneakers as a 7-year-old. So, I was sort of this weird kid sketching and drawing shoes. And, we could get into the whole story a little bit later, but pretty much found myself on this path of trying to, figure out how to make that a career, right? And I didn't know. And I like to say that I was in the right place at the right time more than once. And it led me to some really incredible opportunities and people that I've worked with and mentors that I've had along the way, which led me to ultimately starting Factory Lab.
Beautiful.
Now, I think that's pretty dope. And so I know you were mentioning you had been drawing sneakers and things of the sort. So, what was that specific moment when you realized that this is something that you're really passionate about and want to do for like the rest of your existence?
Well, like I said, I was born in New York. I moved to Florida when I was 10. Um, I started drawing sneakers at 7. Started around the time, this is early 90s. So like, I don't know how old your viewers are that are listening, but early 90s was sort of the like emergence of like sneaker culture, right? Like lines forming around sneaker stores, Nike sort of like really kind of jumping off the way that they did with the Jordans. And, even beyond that, when you think about like, Bo Jackson and you think about Barry Sanders and Deion Sanders and, just the real, like, just those commercials, the marketing, there was just so much like excitement, that was around at that time. And there was a lot of FOMO, as well. Fear of missing out, right? That if you didn't have those shoes, you weren't a part
Girl.
of this movement that was happening. So like, I obviously got sucked up in that just like everybody else. But in a lot of communities around the country and maybe even around the world, at that time, but I know for sure, at least in the United States, there was a lot of violence around the shoes and sneakers. Kids were getting jumped, beat up, even shot and killed, over their shoes. And it was happening at like a pretty regular frequency, that at that time. And my parents being from Jamaica and as any immigrant parent who comes to the United States, they're just trying to provide for their families. And the last thing you want to do is get caught up in all the BS that's going on around, shoes or whatever it is. So, they didn't buy me like the real fancy Jordans and the shoes that were desirable. I still had Nikes, but I had like the two steps below, like, they weren't quite Bobos or Skippies, but they weren't like the high level like Air Jordans either. So, and that was a calculated decision, right? A strategic decision that was made, to keep me out of it. So keep me out of trouble, or being a target, if you will. So that's where the passion kind of started. So I always had artistic ability to draw and sketch, and that's when I'd sort of transition that FOMO into sketching on paper. I started drawing the thing that I couldn't have and the thing that I wanted so badly, which was these really fancy shoes and Air Jordan. So, back then we had a magazine called East Bay, which was free that you got. You called on the phone and like ordered the magazine, and then they sent the magazine to you. You got one every month. And that was my reference. If you look at any of my kid sketches, which I still have tons of them from that time, from 93, 94, 95, 96, and so on, they all look like East Bay like ads, right? Like it's like a sketch of a shoe, and then I have like the name of a shoe, and then it was I put like the weight and like the colors that were available, because that was the only reference,
Yeah.
that I had. And so it was just a hobby, and it was a love, and there was no thought about like, doing this for a living at all or anything. I didn't even know it was possible, at all. Like it was just something that, I enjoyed doing. And, I wasn't the greatest student academically. And especially because of the school that I went to, prior to getting into art school, I went to, John F. Kennedy Middle in Riviera Beach, Florida, which isn't there. And I don't think, well, that specific campus isn't there any longer. I know they tore it down. I think they rebuilt it, but it was a rough school. It was a tough place. You went to school there and you were concerned about, your survival every day, right? And just like, not getting into a fight, or like just not being in the wrong place at the right time. I remember seeing 8 fights in one day, starting like on the bus with two girls fighting with like a razor blade. And then like, and then just carrying through the day. And that was just like, that was normal, right? So like, you didn't even really have time to think about a career, or what a life looked like outside of just outside of what you were doing at the time, which was just, you were just trying to make it through the day. And then, after being there for a couple years, we learned about the School of the Arts, which was on the other side of town in West Palm Beach, and they had this, and it was art school, and I auditioned and was able to get in, and that fundamentally like changed the trajectory of my life. Now this passion that I had for shoes, designing shoes and drawing shoes, now became an actual like real thing that I could go after, because I was in this environment that like encouraged the arts. I had teachers who didn't think I was weird and didn't think I was strange and didn't make fun of me because I spoke properly, which happened when I was at the other, at Kennedy. And that's just, what kids do. But, when I reflect and think back on these things, just like the little things, like, used to get made fun of for not speaking properly, or like, or because I was from New York, and like, wait, you're not that tough. You're not a tough guy. How are you from New York? Because like you watch all the movies and you see all the stuff. So it's just like all these stereotypes. But, at the end of the day, I had a family back home that really loved me and cared about me and encouraged me, even though they didn't really know, like what direction to push me in, or how to like, like push me towards this thing that I love. But I guess in retrospect, getting into the art school was kind of their way of like, this is the thing you like doing. Like, we're going to put you in this art school, and then, and see what happens from there. And, and I was blessed to be around some incredible people and diverse group of people and teachers who were just really like encouraging and like wanted me to succeed. And I didn't have to worry about surviving every day anymore, because now I was around people who were, thinking about their careers and their futures. And even still at that time, I didn't know that I could design shoes professionally. Even though I was around the arts, it was very much an art school from the perspective of, it was more of like your traditional arts, right? Like they didn't really have many students like me that came along the way who was a bit more like design focused. I always kind of felt like, I didn't quite fit in from the perspective of like, I didn't create like my art and my work didn't look the way that everybody else's did. It was, everyone was doing, if you're familiar with like, Jackson Pollock and, the and the Van Goghs of the world, who would like, sort of have their ways of expressing themselves through, through paint and pencil, but usually in a very like, yeah, very abstract or like, sort of messy way, if you will. And that was never my style. I was always very like calculated and very strategic about how I drew. Even when you look at my drawings back then, like, I had the hand of a designer. I didn't know it then, but it was always like that. So, it wasn't quite clear yet, like where I could go along with it until, one magical day, a school came on a recruiting visit out of Detroit, Michigan, where they have this program all industrial design. And, they were on a recruiting trip like any college goes on to different high schools around the country where, they want to show off their best work and what it is that they do and what they're known for to try and get kids excited about their school. And there was a school that came down from Detroit, Michigan, like I said, called the College of Creative Studies, and they showed their portfolio and their work. And there was one shoe in the portfolio. And I was out of class that day. I was in a different class. And as soon as students and teachers saw it, they were like, "Where's Omar? Go find him, get him right now, bring him in the room." And that's how I learned about industrial design and about this school in Detroit and how I could go on this path to design. And like I said, I didn't know that was a thing, before that. It was just, for me, I was just kind of, I just kind of kept, as I like to say, following the breadcrumbs. And I just kind of kept like, designing and creating and doing things, but not knowing. If you asked me at that time, like, how do you become a shoe designer? My answer was get a job at Foot Locker and figure out how to get to Nike. Even, and that is not how you become a designer. But that was, that's how, that was like the lack of information, I had at the time. And, one of my favorite quotes is, you have to see what you can be. And I didn't have those examples to see around me that there was a path until that day that that school showed up. And then that changed everything for me, from that day forward.
What a pivotal moment as well from your humble beginnings, you being first generation, American here with your family immigrating over from Jamaica, having those experiences that are new to them. And it was dangerous. I remember, and I was an East Bay kid. That's how I got all of my my and one. So I was right there with you. But experiencing all of those pivotal moments because they all kind of formed you and created, this vision for you. What would you say was that exact moment you went into creating your own shoe? Because before then, it was a lot of what you were seeing in imitation. Was it
hmm
after you met the school and you were like, okay, this is something I want to do, and it was shoes, or was it something else before we got to the shoe realm?
Say you broke up for, sorry, that last second. What was that last part?
Was it always something that you wanted to do, like designing shoes, or was this creative, design like focused somewhere else before?
Oh no, it was always shoes. Actually, I take that back. It was shoes, and then I don't talk about this much, but I did have this passion at one point before, I really found the path forward to footwear. I was very interested in architecture, but very specifically like design in sports arenas and stadiums. So I did have like a smaller portfolio that like that was like all these different examples of like sports arenas and stadium. Like I love designing like and baseball stadiums and specifically baseball and football, but baseball more specifically because I remember baseball was always like the thing I liked about baseball stadiums was that they were always extremely unique from like the inside. Like when you went to a ballpark, there wasn't one ballpark that was the same. The only thing that was the same was the dimensions of the actual like the diamond, but even the field beyond that was different. But you see baseball stadiums that have swimming pools in the outfield, or Ferris wheels or roller coasters and like all kinds of stuff. And that really fascinated me. So yeah, there was a point in time where I probably thought that would have been a path that I could have
Wow.
gone down, but I wasn't as passionate about it as like as footwear. So yeah, so once I found that path, it was just like, yeah, I'm locked in to shoes. There's no plan B. It's like this is it, and it has to work.
That's amazing. So from
Yeah.
architecture, building stadiums, to designing shoes, I guess it went hand in hand with, the sports theme and just sneaker culture. So that's really interesting though that you just completely switched over. So I love that.
Yeah, yeah, no, that was fun. That was a good time, when I was doing that. But yeah, but like I said, I was, academically I was terrible, so I had a lot of work to do. Once I found out about
Yeah.
this school in Detroit, I needed to get my grades up. And like, and
Mm.
one of the stories I'll share is like, I remember that day after the school came to visit, that wasn't just as a eye opening as much of an eye opening moment that was for me. I had about a year and a half that I had to get my stuff together if I was gonna
Wow.
get into school, because this was my junior year of high school. This is the end of my junior year of high school, and I already had failed quite a few classes already, like, in my freshman year. Again, my arts, I was always money, but I just wasn't interested in, like, my academic classes.
Yeah.
But when I found out about this school, a whole new level of, like, focus, like, came on me, and I was like, "Okay, I can't look in the past. What can I do going forward to like really, to make this opportunity like come true?" And I remember talking to my guidance counselor and my teachers who really were encouraging me also to like, be able to go to this school. And we came up with a plan. And that plan was like that summer after my junior year, I went to summer school. I had to make up 4 classes. I did that. So
Wow.
I had no summer. I was making up those classes. I did. Then when the new school year started, I was a senior, but I didn't have like a free period senior class like other
Hmm.
normal seniors did, where you get those like free periods at the end, and your day is a little
Yeah.
bit shorter than everybody else because like you put the work in. Well, I didn't get that, so I had to make that up, and I had to go to night school, on top of that. And on top of that, I was getting my portfolio together because even though I had all these shoes in my portfolio, from an art perspective, my teachers were like, if you really want to get into this school, you need to show like your full depth and breadth of your artistic abilities. It can't just be a portfolio filled with shoes. They need to see that you can do other things. So that's what I
Wow.
had to do. So I needed to create all these new pieces of artwork. I needed to really go into my bag and like show that I can do this stuff. Like, I can do full, still life drawings of different, whether it was flowers or chairs or furniture, or do a self portrait of myself, like, full, like, a full size, like 1-to-1 version. And I did all this stuff to show
Wow.
like the diversity in my portfolio. So I had to do all that while going to night school, while making up extra classes. And I did this, and I was able to pass all these classes. My GPA was, going into my senior year of high school, it was like a 1.4, and I needed to get it
Wow.
to 2.0 to graduate. So like the clock was ticking and I had to get it done. And sure enough, lo and behold, like, I'm all of this stuff is happening at the same time. One of my favorite quotes I like to use all the time, especially now, is like, I was literally building the airplane as it was flying. And like,
Oh, love that.
and I'm trying to like, I'm getting my portfolio together so I can audition, so I can get like give myself the best chance at possible of getting into school, while at the same time trying to get my GPA up. So in the event I do get into the school, I can actually graduate from high school to get into the school. And sure enough, man, all of those things ended up aligning and working out. I got into the school,
Wow.
I graduated exactly with a 2.0. So like, I think that's a really good example. And really honestly, the first time in my life that like I made a decision that like this is something that I'm super focused on,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna go after it and make it happen, and it happened.
That's beautiful. What determination that took.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
You need a
apparently
documentary.
some things don't change because it's still like that's exactly the way that I am to this day. Is like, when I zero in on something and I'm locked in, like, I usually try and figure out a way to make it happen.
Well, that makes me pivot over to Factory Lab. This platform is changing the game. What was the vision behind creating it, and how did you bring that to life?
Yeah, so I was, the vision for Factory Lab had existed for quite some time. I mean,
Mhm.
now I've been in the shoe business officially, I think 22 years now. It's got
Yeah.
started. at like 19, 20 years old is when I got my first, experience. But I was actually living in India. I was living in outside of New
Wow.
Delhi, India, in a place called Haryana, Sunnypot, which is just north of Delhi. I was running a shoe factory there for this brand called Lotto. I'm sure some people probably remember them. They're still around. The sort of, I call them like like the Nike of Europe, but mostly known for
Mm.
soccer. But now they've evolved into other categories of footwear. And they brought me in because I was working with another shoe company in India called Relaxo, which was like the biggest um, open toe footwear brand at that time in India and even parts of the Gulf, the Middle Eastern region. So they wanted a Western designer who could like come in and really help them maintain their market share in the area. What was going on in India? And India, I mean, what, the second largest country in the world behind China with, what, almost a billion, 1.6 or 7 billion people or something like that. Maybe a little bit less, but more than a billion. uh, and there were a lot of brands that were beginning to like penetrate that market because a lot of people see it as an emerging market, especially a lot of big corporations. So Lotto had been established there for quite some time, even though they're Italian, but they were the number one brand in India for a long time, really long time. But they started feeling that coming under threat a bit because of some of the other brands that were starting to come in, like, Skechers and Steve Madden and these
Oh
guys,
yeah.
are like really starting to come in, and they were trying to figure out how exactly do they how do they solve that problem. So they thought, well, maybe we need to step up our designs, and they knew about me because of the work that I was already doing with Relaxo, and they reached out and they wanted to bring in a Western designer who could also kind of help sort of improve sort of the quality of the designs and maybe make things a little bit more interesting, for the market, especially since like Western design and aesthetic was influencing like so much of the world. So they just thought that was a natural fit, and then it worked out as a bonus for them because I spent a lot of time in China, and I have a huge network there in the supply chain
Mhm.
world of footwear, from manufacturers to developers, different factories and people in the shoe space, that relationships that I've developed over, 13, 14-year window at that particular time. And I knew very well how to create footwear and bring it to life. And so they knew that. And if you're, for those who are up on their history, the China and India never really quite had the greatest of relationships. So so it wasn't an obvious thing for this company to be doing business in Asia. But because I had those connections and those relationships, they saw they saw a pipeline into China, and that's exactly what I was able to do for them. So my co-founder likes to joke around with me all the time. He's like, how's this black dude born in New York, grew up
Yeah.
in Florida, in India, negotiating deals between Chinese manufacturers and like a shoe brand? Like, how does that
Yeah.
even happen? But
Wow.
those are situations that I found myself in, in doing that. So, and I'm going to get to the answer to your question in a minute, but I was there, and it was cool. I was there, and I was there for a couple years, and but I got a little burnt out from it, and I was really like trying to figure out kind of what my next move was going to be. And I always had this idea of like developing or creating like a domestic facility where you could prototype footwear. One of the things I learned being in the shoe business as long as I have, unlike apparel or accessories, which, listen, this is no knock on those industries and people that are in those industries, but it's a little bit easier than footwear in
Yeah.
terms of like the product creation side of it. Footwear is a whole different animal. It's a whole different
Mhm.
beast. There's a reason why when you go to people who've been in the apparel business and in the accessories business for a while, and a lot of them don't want to touch footwear because like
Yeah.
it's hard, and it's complicated, and if you don't understand, like, if you don't really understand that space, like, you could get swallowed up in it really quick, and you could be spending, you could be out 100 grand like before you know it and have nothing to show for it. And that's just what it is. And it's just because the complexity of it, because there's so many different vendors and there's so many components to shoes and there's so many pieces that have to come together. So that's where the relationships are so important. Like, you got to have strong connections and relationships. And fortunately for me, that's what I've had. I've had really strong relationships that I've built over, 20 years, in
Yeah.
these connections, that, like, people that I trust, people who I know that come to me here in America, I go there and see them there. Like, and I've put a lot into it. And that's just because I've always believed in the power of networking and relationships. And, I believe Factory Lab is a company built on relationships. But I left, so I left India. I came to the States thinking about this plan, and then that got a little bit derailed. It did get derailed because I got hit up by Adidas about the opportunity for
Yeah.
Yeezy, and to become the head of the innovation lab. And I accepted that opportunity and focused on that. But what was so interesting about that was that what I was doing and what I was responsible for overseeing at Yeezy was kind of exactly what I was trying to figure out how to do on my
For
own.
yourself.
So,
Yeah.
like, so Factory Lab is a bit of an extension of not only what we did at Yeezy, or what I did at Yeezy from a, a philosophical standpoint, but even all the things that I had done prior to that. And Yeezy was a very interesting opportunity because it was like all the things that I had done up until that point, as unorthodox as it was, living abroad and working in shoe factories and being a designer and working with all these random brands and different things, it all kind of equaled up to this opportunity where, like, it made perfect sense that my job description was what it was because
Mhm.
of all this experience. There was no other job in the world that I could have, that, like, all of my experiences could have been perfect for, other than
Right.
that specific role. And basically got to essentially put this idea into action of, like, this lab or facility where you can rapid prototype very quickly. You can make the barrier of entry into footwear much easier and not as difficult
Mhm.
as it's been in the past, working with creators and leveraging their likenesses and who they are. And by basically putting those two machines together, the machine being, like, one, having the ability to create the product and execute it at a high level, and then two, being able to work with an artist or an entertainer who has the audience, who has the personality and the persona, and has the desire to want to launch a product. And you put those two things together and you get Factory Lab. So that was
Wow.
how that all came about.
Amazing. What a journey. I can't believe you lived in India and worked at those factories. We can only imagine what they're like because we just know that's where all of our materials come from, things like that. But for you to be at ground level for that long is absolutely amazing that you made
Yeah,
it.
no, it's that was an important part of my life. And I consider myself a citizen of the world, or a global
Yeah,
citizen, if you
definitely.
will. I spend a lot of time abroad, even till this day. The international market and understanding, like, how to do business around the world is something I've been very blessed and fortunate enough to have been able to take those risks early on. And I didn't even look at them as risks. It was just like, okay, that's where they make shoes, that's where I need to go.
Yeah.
So being in China as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, and knocking on doors of factories and building relationships from the ground up, and having mentors showing me the way that I was there, and then that evolving not only from China but into Taiwan, into South Korea, into India, into South America, specifically Argentina and Brazil, Europe, Portugal and Greece, to be, specific. And now the work that I'm doing in the Middle East, and in Dubai, and a little bit in Saudi, and the time that I've been able to spend out there. I launched a brand in Dubai before I started with Yeezy, my Omar Bailey footwear brand. I've taught footwear, shoe design and making courses in Saudi Arabia to women. So, like, I've done a lot of this kind of stuff. So, you know being, like, open to doing, not only doing business around the world, but, like, but sort of teaching, and, like, and sharing this gospel I like to call footwear
Yeah.
design, is important to me, not just here in the States, but being able to do it abroad, because that's very much a huge part of my story, is, like, is international and overseas, and my parents not even being from
Yeah.
here, so it's and becoming citizens here, so like that's it's important to me to be able to do it. And for me there was no bigger education than travel and
Right.
spending time abroad and living in places like India and spending as much time as I have in China. And it's been great. And what you learn is that like mostly everybody, mostly everybody wants the same thing. They just want to be around people that they love, they want to be happy, and they want to do cool stuff.
You've definitely accomplished that. You're muted, sis.
Yes, because of my background. But all of that is actually really dope, Omar. What I was saying prior to that is that you need your own documentary. Like, we need to just, I don't know who we need to call, but you need a documentary because your story is so just motivating. And I believe a lot of people need to see it, like visually see it. But
Well,
what
there's
I,
one. There's one out there people could go see. The Keon
Yes, that
I
is it.
did a Yeah, I did a show last or well not last well, we filmed it last year, but it came out this year with it's
mm,
on Roku. It's free to watch
Yes.
on Roku. With Keanu Reeves, aka John Wick,
Yeah.
or aka
I did
Neo.
just watch it. Yes.
Yeah, and he reached out, him and his team reached out, and it was an incredible opportunity to work with him. And they made a documentary about myself and Factory Lab and tells my entire story that I've shared. So you could definitely check that out there on Roku. It's free to watch. Just go on Roku.com and you can watch it. And in addition to that, I also have a book coming out. So which gets even more
Yay.
granular and detail. It's a biography, comes out in Q1 next year. And I'm super excited about it. It's really, really, really good. And I'm not just saying it because it's my book. I've read it 3 times. We just finished the audiobook of it, and you'll hopefully start seeing more of it rolling out. We got a little bit of a book tour planned coming up to some stuff international. I'm gonna be doing some stuff in Dubai later at the end of this year, and India at the top of next year, and then hopefully something around NBA All-Star weekend here in LA. So yeah, we'll see, but I'm super excited about it, and it's really good.
We're excited to. I want to read it. I love a good book read, especially biography. We always ask about that for our guests as well. So we will be asking about those titles in a minute. Um,
Yeah.
but you were stating you're a citizen of the world, pretty much, and all that you've done. Your work has opened doors for the next generation of creators. What does mentorship or representation mean to you in this industry?
It's gotten more and more important to me as I've gotten older. And it's something that I've always tried to like stay connected to, even when I was younger, even when I felt like I didn't know a whole lot about anything yet, but I would always go back. I would always return to my high school and go back to my university and speak to the students there and just try to show them. I always believed in like, why wait until you sort of made it to the top of the mountain? Why not show it as like a real work in progress
Yeah.
and like what you're doing in real time, and like let people learn sort of along the journey that you're on. So I've always been like a big, believer in that. And I've been doing this, doing that for as long as I could, kind of tapping back, into the communities, as much as I can, whether it was speaking at like National Urban League Conference when I was 25, after doing like a
Wow.
handful of internships in college. And, I just spoke at an event in Amsterdam a few weeks ago. And, there's always different things like that popping up. So, and then especially with the book coming out, like definitely want to get into it more, but even more. But, I think what's important for the young generation or anyone who's really just who has a dream and they're trying to follow, but specifically young people. And the reason why I say that is because I've always like, recently I feel like there's just this like sense of urgency amongst young people to
Yeah.
succeed and to like have to be successful like overnight. And, I don't know if it's because of just like, social media and
Right.
everyone seeing what everyone else is doing. And sometimes you don't know what's real and what's not. And like, oh, this person's flying on a private jet and they're driving a Bugatti, and it's like they're really not, because it's just like they just took a picture next to it and they're making it look like it's theirs. But anyway, but I feel like all of those things, all of this kind of like imaginary stuff, that's whether it's, real or not, I feel like is sort of influenced this like
Yeah.
this sense of urgency amongst young people and having to succeed overnight. And I think, the timing of my book is actually perfect, because I feel like if you get one thing out of reading my book, out of reading this book, and it's a, it's a decent size, but I think it's about over 80,000 words in it. And it's a lot. But I think the one thing you take away from it when you read it is like, this took a while for this to happen. It didn't
Yeah.
happen overnight, right? Like it was work, it was failures. There were a lot of mistakes made along the way. There was a lot of learnings that came from those mistakes, before getting, what someone might quote unquote call sort of the top of the mountain, right? Like I was just talking to a buddy of mine, and he was just saying like, he was like, man, like you have the top of the mountain, but it's like you had to wear you had to wear rollerblades to get there, right?
Oof.
Like, and it's like,
Yeah.
and it's not easy. So I think, it's important for young people to hear these kind of stories and know that it's okay to like, you're not going to become a millionaire in a year, and like all
Yeah.
these things aren't going to happen. Like, you really need, I think more importantly, you need to find the thing that you love and that you enjoy doing, that doesn't feel like work. Stay locked in on that and keep doing it. And you're gonna have more bad times than you are good. I can tell you for a fact, like that's what it was like for me. I've had to live in my office and sleep in floors, and take bird baths in bathrooms, and that's just what it took, like,
Yeah.
for it to happen. When you don't have the resources and the financial backing, to make your dreams come true. But what I did have was my mouth, in the sense that like I could network and I could get people to buy into my dreams because they could hear the passion and the love that I had for this thing that I was pursuing. But when you're jumping from like one thing to the next, it's like, okay, I'm going to try and trade stocks and see what happens there. And then that doesn't work out. And it's like, okay, I'm going to jump into real estate a year later. And then that doesn't work. And you jump into the
Hmm.
next, flip flopping and all that doesn't, like, find the thing that you love. Don't chase the money. Like, the money will eventually find you, but you have to make sure that you enjoy the thing that you're doing, and just stay focused on it, and success will come. I don't have a magic ball to tell you when that's going to happen, but you just have to stay with it. That's to me, it's just as simple as that. So that's a message that I would love to just continue to spread, amongst young people, is like, it's okay to like fail. It's okay that you didn't become successful in a year, however you define
Right.
success, or whatever that looks like, for you. But like, it's a long-term commitment. And when I say long-term, it's like, 10, 15, 20 plus year commitment, to this. I mean, even for me, I'm 42, and like, things didn't really start to turn and change for me until like, I was into my late 30s,
Mhm.
is when like, I was able to make like a really good salary, and then being able to start Factory Lab, where to date we've raised over $15 million in capital for the
Yeah.
company, and to be able to grow, this business and have incredible investors, and partners. But that didn't just happen overnight. That all happened because of the work that went into that, and those
Yeah.
people trust in me and my partners, to deliver on the vision that we sold to them. Right? Like, you need the experience, and to go, and to go through that. One of my investors likes to say, he said, my favorite person to invest into is a second time founder, meaning like, you've made the mistakes in the beginning, and if you were ever able to get a second shot on goal, you know exactly what you want to do, the
Exactly.
second time around, when you have it, again. And yeah, so, I totally know what he means when he says that. So, but yeah, all that to say that, like, it takes time to become an expert in your field and who you are, but it starts with, like, with a passion and commitment for that thing, that you're into
Yeah.
to begin with.
I love that you mentioned being an expert. I feel like that's is what's missing. Like you said, because social media makes everything so instant. I always call it the fast food nation. You think you can just run through the drive-through and you come out with exactly what you want.
Yeah,
But we don't really have those people who are spending the dedicated time to become experts at their crafts. And
yeah.
I feel like that's what you're known for. One thing that stands out, Omar, about you is your purpose. What's your why at this point of your journey? And how do you stay motivated when that gets challenging?
My why at this point in my journey. That's a good question. I feel like that's a bit of a I don't know. I feel like that's sometimes maybe a bit of a moving target for me.
Mm.
It changes at times. I think now, it's definitely like, motivating the next generation of inventors and creators for sure. Through Factory Lab. When we started the company, there was a very clear goal and mission that we kind of had with the business model. But then it's evolved, into a little bit more than that. And it's really cool, like hearing that. Like I go to places sometimes and just randomly get approached by someone say, "Yo, I love what you're building." And I'm like, and it always just I never take that for granted. It always just catches me off guard. It happens from time to time. And it's cool to see like, people really are paying attention. And we've been growing a brand, which wasn't necessarily that wasn't necessarily like the goal out the gate. The goal was to like partner with creators and make, like I said, the barrier of entry into footwear much easier for them, leveraging all of my knowledge that I've acquired in this space and in this business as long as I have, and aligning that with the right partners and going to market with product in a very fair and equitable way from a business perspective for those partners that are more fair than the deals that they were getting from maybe bigger brands. And that was important to me to be able to sort of continue to be able to stay on that path. So like, I don't know, as I think about the why, that's definitely a big part of it. Is like keeping that message strong and like letting people um just see that there's a way. And that's what I was saying. And then like, yeah, we weren't, and as far as Factory Lab, like as a brand, like that's the thing that kind of evolved out of all of this, was like now people are recognizing Factory Lab as its own sort of
Yeah,
thing. So knowing that, and knowing that there's power in that, leveraging that platform to be able to spread that same message of like of inspiring the next just generation, like I said, of inventors and creators. And then, I mean, aside from that, I think, I've always been just like a lead by example type of person, and like I just figure just, if I just keep doing, the things that I'm doing and just stay passionate and dedicated and share along the way, like, hopefully it'll continue to motivate those who resonate with it, or who resonate with that story. And I think today too, we have so many more people who are, want to be in business for themselves. I just saw a number the other day. It's like there's like 32 million companies or something like that in the United States, like right now, right? And
yeah,
like, more than half of them are like single, just like founders, one
yeah.
person started a
Startups, yeah.
business,
Hmm.
startup, like that type of thing. But that I don't know what those numbers were 20 years from now, but my guess is that they were a lot less than that. And I think that just goes to show how a lot of people are thinking more independently and about like, a path forward for themselves, and creating their own economic,
For sure.
opportunities by building their own businesses. So yeah, as long as we could keep continuing to encourage, people. I mean, even us as like, me as a black founder. And there was another statistic I saw recently that was just like mind blowing. And we've been really successful at raising quite a bit of venture capital. Like I said, over 15 million, in capital. And I saw a statistic recently that like, less than 1% of those founders are black, who've raised that money out of $360 billion that were
Wow.
deployed last year to founders. 0.4% of those founders were black that received that money. So I feel very fortunate to be in that
Yeah.
0.4%, but that also goes to show you there's there's some work to be done. But it also it's about, access and about knowing what's available to you
Right.
too. As well. I had no idea about I mean, this could be a whole other conversation, but I had no idea about the venture world and how venture capital works or any of that stuff. And I feel like I was sort of on a fast track for an MBA over the last couple years now after gone through multiple rounds of fundraising and
Yes.
having hundreds of calls with different investors at all kinds of stages and really understanding like the nuances of what investors are looking for, what's the difference between an early stage, a mid stage, and a late stage, how rounds even work to
Yep.
begin with, right? Like how and sort of the technicalities in those rounds and how money is transferred and how it all works. And it's very interesting. It's also a very powerful tool in building real enterprise value, right? As in with a company. And that's the path that we're on. And like I said, I just want to keep motivating those who are interested in hopefully following the same, footsteps, no pun intended.
No, for sure. And thank you for taking that leap of faith. Like you said, with us having the most influence, it is interesting that the number of investors or founders in our in America really are that low because
Mhm.
everything really is influenced by our culture. So I love that you took that and you decided to be one of those founders. And my last question, I know B had one, but what's next for Factory Lab? What should we expect to look out for in 2026?
Yeah, I think the next thing for us is really like, we had a lot of success last year with the if you saw the duck boot that we did
Yeah,
with
with
NLE
Yeah.
NLE.
Choppa.
Yeah.
Yeah, that thing was
Took
really ended
off.
up everywhere. What, 500 million views and impressions across social
Mhm.
media. I mean, we did almost $1 million in sales in like first couple
Wow.
hours, and that thing just really like took off and really had a sort of a mind of its own, really, and people really just resonated with it. And Chapo was an incredible partner to have on it, and he's just such an amazing young man whose future is so bright. But I think for us now going forward is like, and this is sort of the part where I think everyone who owns a business, if you're able to kind of make it to this point, like kind of the next step is like one, like, okay, how do we grow up as a business? Meaning, like, it's one thing to be a startup and you work in startup, and it's a bit of sort of spray and pray where you're trying different things and you're testing different things and you're trying not to make the same, mistakes twice. And then, hopefully out of that, you're able to find lightning in a bottle like we did with the
Yeah.
duck boot. Now it's like, what's sort of the next step beyond that? The next step is how do you grow the business and how do you scale the business? So for our future, hopefully you'll end up seeing us in some you'll start to see us across some maybe bigger major retailers across the country and across the world in a much bigger way, where you'll see Factory Lab products and our partnerships, in a like I said, in a much bigger capacity. And I think that's what we're very much focused on internally. There's some really incredible opportunities in front of us right now with some of these potential partners that we're excited. And so hopefully next year you'll start to see us popping up in some unfamiliar places, where we're able to just kind of get the name out into even bigger audiences and bigger people. So so say that, and then obviously my book
Yeah.
as well, being I think a big part of everything happening with the company as well, and sort of kind of representing like that reminder of that message reminder of like, you can be what you want to be. It just takes time to get there.
Love that.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I do have a question, and I thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. So we ask every guest here this question before we close. If you could title your memoir of your journey thus far, what would it be and why?
Oh, well, that's easy. It's the name of the book,
Yes.
Yes.
which is perfect.
Excellent.
The name of the book is Heart and Soul. SOLE. Um,
Oh.
and the reason why is because, it was like I said, my passion started as a 7-year old, sketching and drawing shoes for the reasons that I shared, where I couldn't have the thing that I wanted. So I started drawing the thing that I couldn't have.
Yeah.
Right. And passion and commitment is a word that I use quite a bit in this conversation that we've had. And that
Mhm.
comes from the art, and it's real, and that's where it doesn't feel like work, in what you're doing. And then the soul part is obvious, just that's the soul of a shoe, right? That's the first part
Mhm.
that touches the first part of your body that touches the ground every day.
Mhm.
And and having that connection between, you know the sole of your feet to the soul in your heart, I think is ultimately the recipe to get to you where you're trying to go.
I
Yes,
think
for
that's so
sure.
beautifully put. Yeah.
Yes, that was very powerful.
Yeah, this
That was
is
powerful. I
powerful.
love that. Can't wait to read this book. Like he stated again, he also has his documentary featured on Roku. I actually had an opportunity to view a bit of that. It is truly inspiring. So I would definitely encourage everyone to go and watch. If we could, Omar, just have you again, tell us where we can reach you, what's next, where we can find your products, so that we can make sure our viewers support as well.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. You can find me on Instagram. My personal Instagram is the Omar Bailey, TheOmarBailey. And then of course at Factory Lab, FCTRY LAB. So FCTRY. So basically factory without the vowels. LAB. And you can follow us there, and see all the exciting things that are coming out. We just launched a new website last month, so check it out. Whole new refresh on our products, new products that we're launching. Yeah, really excited about everything that we got going on. There's a lot of really fun things that we have coming down the pike that we're really excited to share with the world. And yeah, you'll be seeing my face a lot more, like popping up on social, and a
Yeah.
lot of the cool content that we've been creating with some of our new partners that we've brought on board. Shout out to Malik G, who's been doing, we were just in the lab yesterday filming a whole bunch of stuff in the lab, and it's just been a lot of fun. So yeah, we want to make sure we bring the fun, to the products that we're creating through all these really unique and different designs that we're doing. So yeah, BYOF, bring your own fun. That's what we
Love
doing out here.
it.
Yeah.
Yes. We're super excited to see you and all of the ventures that you have. I was excited to see the sports collaborations, so I'm really excited to
Yeah.
see what you do with that.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that. That's a whole other thing in
I know. I
itself.
was like,
Working with, yeah, we could have went on a whole tangent on just the NFL
right?
stuff and everything we're doing
Yeah.
within the league, but that'll be for part two.
Yes, part two. Thank you. And again, Omar, we want to thank you so much for your time. We know that you're extremely busy, so we are very honored to have you. Until next time, everyone, keep building, keep believing, and keep elevating one soulful conversation at a time. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.
I love that. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.